Now, here we are on a Monday as we move gently towards the end of February, and Pat McCart is going to join me. Are you, are you foot weary, or are you got a spring in your step today, Pat, as we move towards spring?
Oh, I got a foot in my step, Jude. But is this the last day of
No,
the
not
February, isn't it?
quite. It's I think it's
That's tomorrow,
this is I think it was a couple of days ago. Yeah, this is the 27th.
twenty
So
seventh.
is this a leap year?
Oh, this is not a leap year, is it?
No,
Is
no,
it?
no, no. I don't think so. Don't think so. Don't
No,
think
it's
so.
23. No, it can't be. No,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
no, it's 20 next year. Yeah, this is
It's
so
all
it's
very
28.
baffling, Pat. Do you understand that? Do you
Yeah,
understand why some
it's
years, how do you, like,
yeah.
and then that robbing us of a day, and if you added all those
No,
up, we'd be living much longer.
can you imagine being born on the 29th of February? Jesus. So you have a birthday every 4 years.
Well, you remember, did you ever see The Pirates of Penzance by Gilbert
Gilbert
and
and Sullivan.
Sullivan? The
Yeah.
whole thing, the plot revolves around the fact that this guy was born on the 29th. And so,
Uh,
although he's actually 21, he's
yeah.
according to the birthdays, he's only 5 years old.
Well,
So,
the
yeah, all very puzzling.
legalities of that, or be someone else. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, Pat, this is a serious day for all of us. This is a
Mm.
day that will live in history. It's the day when um, all the differences between the EU and the UK will finally be ironed out. And we here in this happy part of the UK will finally be able to have the best of both worlds, right or wrong?
Jesus, Judah. That is the biggest build up that I have ever come across. And God bless you. I, I think you could be as much as 180 degrees out.
Do you think so? Do you think they're not
I
put
don't
off
know.
deal?
I don't know. I don't know. There's one thing. RT reported that Steve Baker, the former chairman of the ERG group and the deputy in the Northern Ireland office, now he was a fairly hardline Brexiteer, and apparently he walked and he was. Must keep this on as well. He was on resignation watch over the weekend,
Yeah,
and
yeah, I like that.
apparently RT he walked out of 10 Downing Street there about an hour ago or 2 hours ago, and with a big smile and said the prime minister. What did I write it down somewhere that he will deliver a great deal for everyone. Now, if Steve, a former chairman of the ERG's on board, it might be very difficult for the ERG group. By the way, they're not a sort of homogenous group. They're all sorts of weirdos and Looney Tunes and hardliners and extremists and
Some normal
so-called.
people presumably too. No?
Yeah, yeah, and I presume there's a not sensible one in there as well. So whether they'll all agree with it's very hard to say. But Steve Baker, right? Let's stick to the point. Steve Baker is a former chairperson of that particular group, and if he's coming out saying he's with a big smile and saying the prime minister's done a great job for the country, etc., there's a fair chance that the DUP will have to be very careful if they're not accused of throwing out the baby with the water, because I'm presuming they have their 7 tests, Jude, and I don't see how they can get their way on every one of them. I genuinely can't, particularly in regard to the ECJ, because there's no way Europe will allow uh, their role to be. Now, they might push it way back to the background. You can answer that part of it or whatever. They might be way in the background. But the ECJ has to be involved where Europe's involved.
So how,
So
I mean,
there could be
I
a very honest
completely
statement.
agree with you. I mean, how else could you have an agreement if one side wasn't allowed to have any say or any
Yeah.
observation or any judgment on whether it was working or not?
Uh,
That thing is ridiculous. They have this obsession with the notion of being ruled by Europe. But for God's sake,
yeah.
weren't they ruled by Europe for how many years?
Yeah.
Since
15
1973
years.
or something?
Yeah.
But I suppose
Exactly.
it's that they've been singled out. They see themselves as being singled out. But I would say, my money would be on the ECJ, the European Court of Justice, being sort of pushed to the back, and all sorts of
Yeah.
other, what would you call it, courts of one kind or another,
Yeah.
which are thoroughly British,
Yeah.
intervening before you get to. But I still say the ECJ would be the final call.
Yeah. Yeah, I probably like to dance the seven veils. There'll be seven veils before you get to the ECJ. But Jude, remember, there's one thing you just said and you brought home. I saw Deirdre Heenan, Professor Deirdre Heenan, reporting yesterday on Twitter. Some loyalists are basically saying if the ECJ is involved in any way in the final settlement, then we will wreck this place. This is threats from loyalism. We will burn this place down.
Who said that?
This is Deirdre Heenan was reporting as saying these are some of the threats that are emanating from loyalism. Now, Jude, so if where I'm going with this is if that is the attitude in loyalism and in the hardline DUP, that any role for the ECJ, the European Court of Justice, that if they're in there anywhere at all, that they're going to reject this. Where do we go?
The thing is this, Pat, again and again, like the DUP and other loyalists like Jimmy Bryson and Jim Allister say that they are part of the UK and they must remain part of the UK and there must be no intervention or different rules or whatever. But when the UK makes a judgment, the UK Parliament makes a judgment, when the UK Prime Minister makes a judgment, oh no, you have to, it all depends on us, i.e. a minority within a minority in this corner of Ireland. They must be the ones that are the final deciders. I think that's so patently absurd, it's ridiculous.
Absolutely. But it's going to be very interesting. I think you see another 7 tests. By the way, I was watching the Sunday Politics program on BBC yesterday, and Ben Lowry was on, the editor of the newsletter.
I thought he's been on an awful lot recently too.
Yeah,
he's been on a fierce amount.
I don't understand if Ben's given his private opinion or the newsletter's opinion, because the two seem to be very interlinked. But anyway, he came out with a line that I nearly fell off a chair and sort of, Ben, are you serious? He said the DUP had been very reasonable and very pragmatic in regard to the protocol. And I'm going, good merciful Jesus, I would love to know when they're being, unbalanced and unpragmatic, in the sense that, like, I think some of their behavior. They originally started off saying that protocol was a good idea, that it opened up opportunities for Northern Ireland businesses to work into both Europe and to Britain, and it was a good idea. And now we're back to nearly 180 degrees, that it's been a disaster, that such and such and such, that it's interfering with the constitutional position, that it's totally unacceptable, and all the rest of it. So you're the guy here. You tell me, how did we go from there to there?
Well, that's what's baffling me, because you're absolutely right. They all welcomed it, and they're on record as saying, that it was essentially the best of both worlds. Was it that they hadn't thought the thing through? I would have thought it would have been pretty obvious from the very beginning that if you have Northern Ireland as being treated differently in terms of trade, that clearly different rules obtain. I mean, it's so obvious. I can't, there must be some catch. I don't believe that the DUP would be that silly that they wouldn't see the fact that they'd have to have different rules.
Yeah. But Richard, let's move on. Apparently what's happening today, and I don't know, apparently this afternoon, I was listening to RT News because I just wanted to see what the up-to-date was. Apparently the European Parliament members are getting sight of the document this afternoon. Apparently all 27 countries have been lined up in an agreement with it. Ursula von der Leyen is in Britain as we speak. I think she's met the Prime Minister, and apparently she's going to meet King Charles.
Yes, that's right. That's teasing off a lot of people.
Because they're saying there's almost as if there's a royal assent to this. By the way, did you hear? There was apparently there's some suggestion that this deal might not have to go for a vote in the Parliament, that they'll say it's a declaration, and that it's just changing the previous, and that they won't put it to the Parliament. That's going to be very interesting, isn't it?
Well, I noticed that because several times Sunak and others, Rab too, I saw a Rab interview yesterday, they were asked, will it go to a vote? And in all cases they said, yes, they'll get the opportunity to express their views, which of course is not the same thing.
Apparently it's going to be pitched as a declaration. In other words, a restating of the facts, further on negotiation, but that the original deal, but this is just a restating of the deals already done. You've already voted on that and you've accepted it, type thing. So this is just a reworking of it, and it's just going to be like the Downing Street Declaration. Going to be very interesting to see how that works.
Well, you see, I think they're within their rights. It's not a new treaty that they're going to be signing up to. It's simply an interpretation of what they've already signed up to. And a pretty liberal one too in terms of the EU. Of course, the reason I think they would hold back from having a vote on it is that you might have a sizable chunk, not a majority by any means, but a sizable chunk of the Tory party declaring themselves opposed to it. I mean, the worst thing of all would be if you had to rely on the Labour votes. Labour says they'll vote for it. Then Sunak would look like, a Tory Prime Minister, depending on the Labour
you have to
Party.
depend on your opposition rather than your own party to get someone through. That's not a good look. Yeah.
But they say that's not actually likely to happen if you had a vote. They say that even with the ERG people voting against it, you still would have a majority of Conservatives voting for it. But it would just expose the extent to which the Tories are divided on it. So I suppose they're trying to avoid that.
I don't remember who it was. I think he may have been some sort of senior Tory yesterday. It wasn't the chairman. His name escapes me. But somebody said to him, what about maybe would we lose another prime minister? And he says, look, we can't afford to lose another prime minister over this. Because if Rishi'S sort of turns around and says, right, this is my deal, and if you don't vote for it, I'm out of here. Like, that's like turkeys voting for Christmas. That's the Tory party finished.
That's right. I mean, they look like they're finished for quite some time anyway. But if that was to happen, and you see, it's very interesting because Sunak, I'd say, is very keenly aware of that fact that they daren't dump him, and therefore he's able to get away with stuff that otherwise he mightn't have been able to get away with.
Because when you knock down, it's like 10-pin bowling, and you need 1 pin to stand. Like if you knock this one down, the game's over.
How do you think?
Here's the other thing. Micheál Martin was on with former Taoiseach and now the Minister for Foreign Affairs.
Yeah,
and what he was suggesting or intimating was that there's been a significant change in. He said the last British Irish conference meeting was the most substantive that he'd been at in a very long time, that there was real engagement. I think since Sunak come on, he's a growing up politician with grown up ideas who believes in a sort of prevention and behaving in a certain way. Jude, I think Boris Johnson's era will be regarded as like Trump's absolute mayhem. And Jude, the nerve of the guy last week to intervene and say that my deal, that's the man. This was a deal signed in bad faith. He was going to renege. They were going to break international law, and he still has the nerve to suggest that this is the way to go.
Yeah.
Sunak as a party trying to start the deal that was agreed, but to sort of temper it or to sort of tune it or tweak it, whatever word you want to use, and make it work. Yeah. Which avenue do you think we should be going down?
Well, you mentioned Rishi Sunak as being a grown-up, and to be fair to him, he does appear to be grown up, and he tends to be polite, and he tends to be fairly energetic looking, and he's got things to a point where nobody else got them to, which is where I think the DUP are going to have to like it or lump it. But Rishi Sunak was and is a Brexiteer. Now, all of the problems that the DUP are facing, that we're all facing here in this part of the UK, all the difficulties that the mainland UK is suffering from, all of these are to a great extent due to Brexit. So why would a smart guy like Rishi Sunak, a grown up, as you say, in the political world, why would he push for Brexit?
Yeah, Jude, they've got it wrong. They've got it totally wrong. Like, I don't know if we mentioned this in Freddie, but the Sky Business News editor or correspondent. Should have gotten me totally by surprise on Friday when she said it, that Russia, despite the sanctions from the Western world, which are really, really considerable, will grow more this year than Britain. And remember last week about the tomatoes and vegetables and all the rest couldn't be got. Remember the couple of government spokesmen come on with this absolute hogwash that is because of bad weather in continental Europe and in Africa. Jude, within about an hour of that statement, social media was awash with photographs of supermarket chain in Germany and Italy, France, and Spain, complete with a full range of tomatoes, whatever. And if there's bad weather and over there, how come their shelves are full and ours are not? The reality, they're bullshitting a lot about Brexit. And if the economy, and by the way, Jude, there was someone else I just noticed the other day. Apparently, the value of the pound has dropped by 20% against the US dollar since 2016. Now, you tell me that Brexit's got nothing to do with all of that.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think there are an awful. I would say there's a majority of people in the UK who now believe that they shouldn't have gone with Brexit. But it's the old thing of, my God, why we can't afford to turn around and say we were stupid and then reverse it, I mean, I think they should. You don't have to say they're stupid. I mean, they could say, well, we got caught up on a sort of a nationalistic fever and we did something that was to our detriment. But of course, they'll never say that. To get back to the practicalities of this, one of the things that they point out as the way this will operate on the ground is these green and red lanes.
Lanes, yeah.
As in the customs, if you're coming back from your holidays, customs. You think that will be that's being put forward as something, an advance on what we had before, lack of clarity earlier on, but this makes it clear. Do you think it does?
I think it's like Seamus Mallon's famous one about Sunningdale. The Good Friday Agreement was sort of Sunningdale for slow learners. I think this is, Jude, they mentioned this red lane and green lane back, 20, 30, not 20, months ago. I was going to say 3 years ago, And I remember hearing it a long time ago that there was an idea, right? Apparently about 70% of the goods coming into Northern Ireland are retail. And in other words, and they will go through the green channel and they will not be touched, nothing to do with anybody. Go ahead. It's the stuff that's coming on that could go on to the Republic of Ireland and therefore into the EU. And that's the ones that will get the red channel. But there's data sharing now apparently by the British, which by the way, Boris Johnson and David Frost, there was no indication that they were serious about negotiation. They weren't providing detail so the EU could understand what was happening. That detail has now been supplied. And they're happy that they're able to cut down on the checks because there's going to be a trusted trader scheme. There's going to be data sharing. There's going to be all this sort of stuff. And they're saying the checks that will be involved will be only for stuff that's going on to the Republic of Ireland. And it's going to be a very light touch regulation. So it's not a major issue.
Yeah, that sounds good. And it certainly suggests the right attitude to take. But riddle me this. How will they know? If I'm a man or a woman in Britain and I'm exporting something and I say, I'll put this in the green channel because it's only for north of Ireland. Yeah. How will they know I'm telling the truth?
I will presume there's spot checks, Jude, and there's going to be trusted trader scheme. So in other words, Jude, if you are found to be somewhere, we'll just use the word cheating, I presume there will be penalties and there will be consequences. There will also be the EU, the data will be saying what everything is that's going on to the Republic of Ireland. Jude, I presume all of the brains in the EU and the UK know all that fine detail that they've got civil servants working it all out, the technical data and the technical data. So, Jude, I presume they've all this worked out and agreed, and checks that'll be built into the system.
I'm just making the point that, you see, this has been welcomed by, I think, the DUP, the idea of the green lanes and the red lanes. But despite the fact that it's green lanes, there's always bound to be some degree of checking within the green lanes. Otherwise, I think it'd be absurd. Like if you come back from your holidays and you go through the green lane, you know perfectly well the chances are they won't pull you in because you're saying I haven't got anything. But they could. They could, and they sometimes do. Otherwise, it'd be absurd. Anybody could say, I could come with everything, it was illegal or whatever, and I'd walk through the green lane and I'd be fine because there was nobody checking.
Jude, I can't answer that, but I would presume that the brains they have enough brains within the civil service in the UK and the EU to work out the fine detail. And I take it they're not idiots, that it's not just based on blind trust, that there has to be some sort of mechanism that they can follow whatever items are going across. And like Jude, there's back to this. Apparently there's trusted trader schemes, there's data sharing, and they will be able to follow what things are. And Jude, but you're 100% right. Somewhere along the line, there has to be would have to be random checks.
Yeah, and I mean, it's so obvious. And the DUP should have got that into their head at the beginning. If you have a different system for the North, you have to have different rules.
Absolutely. Jude, let's repeat this. Northern Ireland, the island of Ireland, is not Britain, and this is where the EU meets. And we have had checks for foot and mouth before, and that's repeated again. There are many ads for things like insurance, motor tax, even those ridiculous ads for your next funeral, if you know what I mean, where it's not available in Northern Ireland. So that's Northern Ireland. And by the way, Northern Ireland was the only part for many years of the UK where they had their own parliament, which meant it was different.
Aye, that's right. Okay, there's two things, Pat, then finally. There's the ECJ, the European Court of Justice, and you have this green lane, red lane. Those are the two components, really, of this deal that's now about to be ratified, we hope. Yeah. Do you think the DUP will accept it?
No. If I'm reading it right, they're going to find they have 7 tests, Jude, and there's no way. See, if they go for this absolutist, purist position in regard to the goods and to the ECJ, then I can't see how they're going to take it. And if Professor Deirdre Heenan's warning about some of the remarks emanating from loyalism, that if anybody and unionism accepts this deal for a role with ECJ, they will burn this place down. I think at this stage, reality and sort of common sense has gone out the window. It's all about this perceived threat to their constitutional position, and they won't listen to that it has to be 100% our way or nothing.
But do you not think that when it comes to
I hope I'm wrong.
You don't think when Hardy comes to Hardy that guys like Jimmy Bryson and like Jim Allister and the DUP for that matter will say, well, they mightn't say it publicly, but they'll say, look, we really have no choice.
Well, you're working on this. I used to give them credit for common sense. That's sort of gone out the one. If you've got the Tory party voting for this, the Labour party voting for this, and whatever, and then you come to Northern Ireland, you've got Sinn Féin voting for it, the SDLP voting for it, the Alliance Party voting for it, and maybe even the UUP voting for it, and you're left with the rump of the DUP, some of them maybe even the Jim Allister faction, and then whoever Mr. 167 votes himself, Jamie Bryson. Jude, by the way, let me reverse that question. Do you think they'll go for it?
I think they will. Because I think they're not stupid. I think they'll realize that there's no other way. It's pretty uncomfortable, but they'll have to accept it. And if they don't accept it, it's them against the UK and the EU.
Yeah, against them. Hold on, that's been the way. You asked me? Somebody asked me the question, Freddie. Which is the dog and which is the tail? And I still haven't figured out.
Well, this is it. You see, they do actually think that they have the right to tell the British government what to do. It's crazy. On the one hand, they're swearing loyalty to the British government. On the other hand, they're saying to the British government, no, you can't do this. Yeah. So we come into Brexit because the UK government decided, or the UK population decided so, And now we're going to decide what kind of terms we have with the EU because of what Jamie Bryson or the DUP says.
Yeah.
Forget it.
You know,
Forget it. I don't think. I
uh,
think they'll swallow hard and accept it, but it might take them a
yeah.
while. They'll take a long time. They'll take, I suspect, a week or two even, with their lawyers going right through it with the proverbial fine tooth comb, so that they look as if they're very thoughtful, and then
Jude,
they'll come and say
I'll
we
I'll
changed
leave
so
it.
much. They'll say we
I,
changed so much of it.
I'm
Look
not,
at that
I'm
good
first,
deal we got.
Jude, I met a senior British politician quite some years back, and I remember he said to me that the nationalist people were very, very lucky to have people like John Hume and Seamus Mallon. He says they were people of gravitas and status that the British government found it very hard when they went across to Europe and when they went across to America to counteract what they were saying, that their status and their gravitas and their logic and whatever. And then compare that, sitting the last thing, are loyalism pretty unlucky? If Jimmy Bryson and Jim Allister are the people that are yanking the chain of unionism, God bless them.
Well, I'll tell you this, Pat. I think I'm being dispassionate. I think Jim Allister, you can tell he's a barrister. He's got a keen
Yeah,
mind and he
that
can
doesn't make us
assemble
right.
an argument. Now, in the end, it's rubbish,
Yeah,
but it is very impressive when it's laid out. And the same thing I would
yeah,
say reluctantly about Jimmy Bryson. Jimmy Bryson may
yeah,
be, saying we'll burn the place down. Jimmy Bryson may have only got 100, 200, 167 votes. But
yeah.
for a little young fella like him, he's able to put the thing quite persuasively. Now,
I,
in reality, it doesn't work.
I was reading John Bolton, the former defense
Yeah,
secretary. I'm currently reading his autobiography, or
yeah,
not his autobiography, but his book in the
yeah.
Situation Room, what else called. And halfway through it, I realized what an idiot this man truly is. The fact that he's highly intelligent and can put out an argument, has basically first rule: America has the right to do whatever it wants, and morals don't come into it. And even if it does, America is morally right. End of story.
Yeah.
Jimmy Bryson and Jim Allister said nationalists should accept the fact that this is places for unionism. Unionism is top dog. We should have no Irish dimension here at all, and we should all be little Brits, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And if you don't like it, hard cheese.
Yeah, and in the end, that's what it comes down to. I mean, I admire both of their brains. I think both of them have got sharp minds, but in the end, it comes down to that intolerant
It's
strain of
equally
unionism,
flawed
which
brains and
is,
might
I mean,
intelligence.
that's a boat that there's been a hole put in about 30 years
Yeah.
ago, and it's never
Yeah.
going to float again. But Jimmy and Jim are hanging on to it.
Jimmy realized that the boat's sinking. Yeah, go ahead.
We've only a minute left, Pat, and I wanted to talk about the International Space Station.
Yeah,
Do
God
you
bless
know
you.
how high
I don't, I
the
don't know
International Space Station is?
yeah, I know it's up there, but
It's 200, over 200 miles up. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine traveling? And it goes to 17,000 miles an hour. God, serious. I'm scared when I get onto a flight for the States or for Europe. Never mind
but
that.
is there some problem with it?
Well, there was a problem. It's Elon Musk runs this thing, this space blast, SpaceX was to take off today. And it didn't go because there was some last minute glitch, but they're going to do it tomorrow. But he must be making a fortune on that, He's renting out essentially his equipment to the guys that were to go were two Americans, a Russian, and a guy from the United Arab Emirates. And they're going to replace people who've been there for the last 6 months. How would you fancy being on board a spaceship or an international space station, however big, for 6 months?
Jude, I suffer badly from claustrophobia. I could no more do that. Jude,